Hey, it's Soul, and welcome back to Warcraft Weekly, your one-stop shop for copium-filled content. Hit the like button, subscribe for more of the things, and, it's hard to not be excited to be a WoW player right now. Okay, maybe we're a little nervous, probably trying to manage expectations, but now that it's been confirmed that patch 10.1 will go live on the week of May 2nd, after what's been pretty much built up as a catch-up patch with 10.0.7, we've got to talk about what the WoW team has learned from over the past few expansions, as in the bad calls, and what they're executing on now. This is a very biased take, obviously, but I feel like when I log into the World of Warcraft these days, I have this very healthy assortment of things to do. There are things that I'm done with, like the rep grinding and reaching my endgame goals on my main, but I also have all these easy opportunities to get my alts up and running. Just the other day, I leveled up a warrior and I slammed the Forbidden Reach for a few hours. I got it up to an item level of 370, whoop-de-doo, and somehow managed to kill one boss in the heroic Vault of the Incarnate raid. Not a bad log, if I say so myself.
And he does say so himself.
But the point is, it was very easy to catch up, with simple catch-ups to the most basic of WoW systems, regular-ass gear. Going as far back as Warlords, character preparation started pretty early with garrisons of all things. For efficient collecting of easy gear and gold, Legion had artifacts and rando legendaries, Battle for Azeroth had artifacts and essences that pulled us all over the place, Shadowlands had more grinds and distractions, so I'd say that character prep hasn't felt this good since, I guess, Mists of Pandaria over 10 years ago. Now check out this chart of how long WoW's patches were during this more modern era. Actually, first take a second to laugh at how much Dragonflight that we've been able to enjoy right now compared to Shadowlands before the 9.05 patch. That's when Valor was introduced, by the way, in the middle of Season 1. The difference is like night and day. It's a huge improvement that I'd say it normalizes our expectations. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Dragonflight sets this new standard, a bar that I want to see the WoW team try to overcome rather than just stagnate. Quality is one thing, but scheduling is arguably more notable, especially if folks are not having fun. Notice that the Dragonflight timeline for Season 1 closely resembles the likes of Battle for Azeroth, meaning that we may see seasons that last approximately 5 months. If that's the new standard, it means Season 3 will begin sometime in October, well out of the way of any major events outside of what could be its closest upcoming event, BlizzCon, on the first week of November. Now that's not confirmed at the slightest, I'm only just going by history, but okay, 5-month-long seasons. If we map that out and assume that WoW's next expansion releases in like late 2024, is that going to mean we're going to get 5 seasons with 4 regular ones plus an encore, like a fated season? What do you think? And it's not even just about the quality or the scheduling, but also the volume, the quantity of things. Dragonflight, I gotta admit, it's made a really good impression on me, a grizzled, almost 20-year veteran. In the past few months, we've gotten things like heritage armor and outdoor events and zone content and significant class changes, evergreen systems, tons of additional rewards and cosmetics and gear. When with Season 2 around a month-long corner, we can look forward to not just the content, but more class changes and tweaks to very important pillars of World of Warcraft, like how Mythic Plus is going to work, and gear upgrades for everybody, and another zone, and this one being pretty big and full of more activities. What did we get from Shadowlands in their very first patches? Little to nothing. Legion gave us Karazhan and the Trial of Valor mini-raid, so we gotta give them credit there, but efforts like those seem to be a lot more calculated this time around, as we know that a mega dungeon is coming in the middle of Season 2. It's unfair to compare Dragonflight as a whole to any other expansion for very obvious reasons, but if I were to compare the first 5 months of Dragonflight to the first 5 months of like any other expansion, I think Dragonflight would win. We gotta give credit where it's due though. I say Mists of Pandaria felt great in the first 5 months thanks to the narrative experience with repping up with those factions. Vanilla felt great too because I was an idiot and everything felt refreshing, and Legion was alright for me because I happened to get good legendaries. I know I've been painting Dragonflight like it's the start of some WoW renaissance, but the game is not without its flaws and issues, like give me about 30 seconds. And there's no shortage of players who want a thing that comes at direct conflict with other players' desires. When I want to talk smack, you're going to hear it, but as a whole, like I said, it's a really great time to be a WoW player. Players can rejoice and rage out in 10.1 with another change in how to roll for loot. See, I told you, turn around. A new loot option is being added in the new patch that allows eligible players to Transmog roll. From how it sounds, the greed button is going to be replaced by this Transmog button, and in the battle for rolls, Transmog will actually win over greed. So what does that mean exactly? If a piece of gear drops, if someone needs on it, then of course they get the first priority roll, and those people will be rolling against each other. The next highest priority would be people who changed their loot spec but still rolled need because it happens to be an upgrade. But if no one in the group rolled need for the loot and everyone happened to greed roll, then Transmog is going to get first priority, followed by people who just roll for gold or to disenchant, which kind of screws the disenchanters over. I think this works out though, because at least the gear is going to be used, and it only works when you can actually learn the appearance, and once you have, then you can never Transmog roll for that item again. I find this to be a great improvement over the current model, where effectively Mog hunters had like almost no hope of ever getting appearances. I felt disenfranchised during this patch, and I didn't do a lot of raid finder at all. And maybe we should just go back to personal loot as an option. That's a totally fair take, but I'm happy that in 10.1 we're going to see greater chances of loot going to people who are actually going to use it. With the known date for the upcoming patch, the clock's ticking, and eyes are focused even harder on significant system changes like with Mythic Plus. This week ahead of the PTR build, the WoW team announced a round of changes and much needed nerfs for folks to check out before it goes live on these PTR realms. In the case of explosives, the health of these explosives has been brought way down to the point where now it's basically going to be the tank's job to take care of explosives if they're nearby. Explosives are not going to apply a damage shield as mentioned the other day. They're still going to nuke the party, but they will also spawn at most 2 at a time, with a brief period between respawns as they're being killed. This will make explosives much easier to handle, as it takes a bit of weight off of the healer if they're being managed and are killable in a reasonable amount of time. It also might be okay to let one explosive go off and then the healer can top people off before the next set appears. That could be an option too. The afflicted affix, where you need to either cleanse or heal up a number of targets, was only made a little bit easier to heal because their total health was nerfed. That was the only change that we saw though, so my hopes are that we see the spawn rate managed like Explosion, where there's only 2 at a time with a cooldown between spawning. That way folks can actually heal and there's sufficient time for cleanses to come off cooldown. And incorporeal mobs are now immune, as was announced earlier. That means if you sheep or you fear a mob, it's going to last pretty much its full duration and it's not going to break on any sort of damage, but like afflicted, there are just too many spawns. The way I see it, there's a certain balance to maintain when in a situation where players have to hard switch to a target. Now it's one thing to spread for quaking or volcanic, that's kind of a peripheral vision thing that doesn't always change your behavior. It's another though when you've got a half dozen explosives spawning and decisions need to be made and globals are spent, and sometimes they're spent inefficiently. There's a line where you can manage the affix, like, okay, spiteful, you just gotta run away. But crossing that line means playing the affix first and the dungeon second, with this constant management of ever spawning ads, and I hope to see the team continue working on making these challenging without being too overwhelming. There are also continued calls for affixes to be almost entirely removed altogether in favor of giving mobs and bosses additional abilities at certain key levels. Kind of like how raids increase in complexity as you go from heroic to mythic. I want to hear your responses on this, and of course I'm gonna go first. When a comment like this pops up on a thread or a forum post, this sounds pretty cool. Thematic changes to dungeons to add challenge, it sounds a lot more interesting than just a blanket combination of generic looking affixes. Like, okay, what does entangling snare effects have to do with Vortex Pinnacle? It'd be cooler if that first boss with the cyclones in Vortex Pinnacle had some additional abilities or effects to make the encounter more interesting, or dare I say, fun. But what would this look like even on paper? Well, it's gonna look like 8 dungeons multiplied by an average of 3 bosses and any number of special trash mobs that would be given these additional new abilities, multiplied by however many milestones that would add said abilities. As for the actual work, the team would need to design and engineer and implement and test and tune, and even after going live, more rebalancing and tuning while working on the next round of dungeons 5 months from then. Now, I don't like saying that too much work for the WoW team is an excuse. It's not. Like, let them suffer in the web that is talent balance as it is right now. But I do question if those efforts are going to deliver on what we think it would. Let's really consider how players would respond to something like this. Like, they would go into a key and they would play the key, and then for each dungeon encounter, they would see these new and additional sets of abilities to handle every few levels, made to make the dungeon more challenging. Abilities, boss or trash abilities that, for all we know, add things that detonate if you don't blow them up on time, or they would have these mobs that you need to dispel, and snares, and more. The only difference is that we know what's coming and it's not going to change. Add-ons would definitely be available for players who want to use them, and all that's left to do then is to just execute. After that, when the dungeon mechanics are fully mastered, is there really any complexity left, or is it just that the mobs hit harder, or the bosses get more spongier? Just like anything in gaming that's static, eventually the challenge is gone and a Mythic 20 is going to be blasted like the Daily Heroic. Like, Molten Core was hard until players figured it out and practiced and shared knowledge and then repeated this the same way week after week. So is that what players really want? And I think we should talk about the bigger change that's coming to Mythic Plus, and that's how affixes are going to be added at later keys. In their announcement, the WoW team said that after Fortified and Tyrannical, the level 4 affix would now appear at level 7, and the level 7 affix as we know it would now appear at key level 14, which is worth noting. Timing 14s on both Fortified and Tyrannical is pretty much the equivalent to Keystone Master. This is going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to widen the threshold of complexity in dungeons. Players who struggle with the additional complexity will be able to push higher keys and get higher rewards before encountering these tougher dungeons. In fact, it might be mathematically possible to achieve Keystone Master just by running 13s and overpowering the heck out of it since there's no third affix. That sounds fun, but the focus is more about the accessibility. More players at the lower skill band are going to have a little bit more to do. There's access to even better gear. Actually, according to the information we have available, running 6s, that is only running Fortified and Tyrannical, will award gear equal to the end of normal raid, as long as you get that stuff from the vault. Running 13s, which means 2 affixes, that's going to give mid-level heroic raid gear from the vault. So the casuals are getting gear. Whoa, and there's not going to be any adverse effects for the folks running high keys for vault loot or crafting materials. It's not a guarantee at all, but I think that between these key changes and the item level brackets that separate low-level gear from the best gear, we might see a more healthy and robust lower key community. The people who move up and move on, they're not going to look back because they're going to where the gear is. In fact, this separation could mean that more can be done at this lower band. Like, for example, what if the timer was totally lifted from key levels 6 and lower? Now, there'd be consequences to that. It would almost mean that you wouldn't need keystones at all. Like, I guess you'd be able to just talk to any old pedestal and start a run, and as long as you clear it, you would always get a +7 key. I mean, I don't know, this is just a very wild idea. I just think that there are some new possibilities that can open up by widening these levels. There is a concern though, and that's when moving from key level 13 to 14 when you introduce that new affix. Early on, it's going to feel jarring being introduced to an affix at an already fairly high level key. I mean, I say that, but like, some of you folks look at a 14 and you just roll right through it like it's a 2, and I mean this in all seriousness. You are quite good at the game, congratulations. But I'm willing to step into the ring and argue that moving up to a 14 will not be as wild or as crazy as one would think because of the very nature of these affixes. So let's take a look. The first tier of affixes, Tyrannical and Fortified, they change your overall dungeon approach, like when are you going to pop cooldowns, or are you even going to do keys that week if you care about score. The second tier of affixes that we see starting at +6 are unavoidable. They're sort of like gear checks. Raging and Bursting will hurt. Sanguine Puddles will ruin you if the tank is asleep. You can't avoid Bolstering, and you have to avoid Spiteful. The third tier of affixes though, they're treated a little bit differently. You can avoid Explosive Damage. Entangling can mean nothing or everything depending on when you break your vine. Incorporeal and Afflicted can be shut down, and Storming is just something that you avoid. The added complexity makes the runs harder overall, but it doesn't automatically make encounters more deadly or punishing than they already are, because we're already dealing with these earlier fixes like 7 keys ago. Let me know what you think, and that's the show. You know, it's great to be wrong about things, especially release dates, because when I am wrong, it's because things are coming out sooner. Yes! I do hope this was the plan all along and that the WoW team isn't under pressure to produce earlier for the sake of like Diablo 4. Cynicism, of course, makes me think that it probably is that, although the copium makes me think that, yeah, the teams really came together to set up this insidious release design to take all of our money. With the patch coming soon, I've got to consider if I'm going to continue my long-running tradition of a survival guide and a new Bob jingle and probably leveling more alts for funsies, because I'm really enjoying the event. I don't think I need to have time walking on forever, but this is a great event that they ought to do like at least once a year. Like once is good, twice is trial of style, and then I'm just gonna bitch even louder over the trial of style only being like twice a year. But for now, let's wrap things up with a huge thanks to the family over on Twitch, the lovely, lovely folks on Patreon. I hope to read off some more names soon, and a big thanks to you, viewer. You fed the algorithm and helped me out. Next week, I want to be closer to fully understanding the routine of 10.1 so I can spit it back at you in an easy to follow guide, so be on the lookout for that. More reactions to the latest developments, and etc. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.